Tony, do you have a problem with him singing in Spanish at the Super Bowl?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. What I'm saying is, I think that the audience choice is weird. Why choose to sing in only Spanish except for the words "God Bless America" at the Super Bowl for the halftime show? What
Because
is the
his
point in
songs are
doing so?
predominantly in Spanish, and
Why do you say predominantly?
the official language of Puerto Rico is both English and Spanish. Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States, so he's representing Puerto Rico by speaking the language that his songs are written in. He's a Puerto Rican artist.
In today's video, Adam Mockler absolutely destroys Tony Kinnett in a heated debate. What starts as cultural criticism quickly turns into a full-blown meltdown about language, patriotism, and identity. Adam does what a lot of people refuse to do. He calmly points out that celebrating Latino culture on one of the biggest stages in America isn't anti-American, it is American. And let's just say, once the conversation shifts to Trump's track record on divisiveness, things get very uncomfortable very fast. So let's dive in and watch how Adam Mockler shuts down Tony Kinnett's Bad Bunny meltdown in this live debate.
So Bad Bunny had overall a rather unifying message. When he said God bless during the Super Bowl halftime show, he didn't say God bless Latin America, God bless other countries. He said God bless America. It seems like overall he wanted to push a unifying message, and conservatives took that to tear him down and divide us even more. If you didn't like the halftime show, that's fine. I mean, like, my grandpa sometimes, he thought it was cool, but he's sometimes like, I don't really fully understand what's going on here. That's fine if you don't like the halftime show. But I think the vitriol that we saw coming out of the right was next level. I'm not going to claim the halftime show is super pro-America, as Tony said. I don't think the halftime show has to be super pro-America, but I think all things considered, him saying God bless America, him speaking out against ICE at the Grammys, this is about as American as apple pie. I mean, criticizing the government in America, very American in my opinion. So,
Tony, I'm guessing you see that slightly differently.
Yeah, I do, because what follows after God Bless America, which again, the one Spanish phrase in the show, not even, Dios bendiga America, he then followed by listing not the United States of America, or again saying, hey, you know what, I'm, from the left on this, but I still love America. American flags, kind of a Charlie Puth at the beginning. Can we agree the national anthem at the beginning was just incredible?
of course, yeah, he's like auto-tune. He's like an auto-tune human being. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, he's a guy with perfect pitch. And a jazz musician. I love watching any talk he gives ever. It's just like I go glass-eyed. It's incredible. Regarding Bad Bunny, though, he's followed God Bless America by then listing a bunch of countries that aren't America. It's the North and South America. What he's trying to suggest is that we're all Americans. That's not what the Super Bowl is about. That's not what it's supposed to be. It's not a Pan-American competition sport. To be completely honest, given the cultural history of it, it would be more appropriate for something like that at the World Series. And I understand the cultural backlash to that because it's performative, not because it's bad to suggest that it's, an amazing thing that we've created in the Western Hemisphere, but more so to say, hey, I'm going to get out here and be performative, and I'm going to throw some jabs, and then what you get is a bunch of gaslighting from both sides. For example, some of the stuff that came out from the left, some that came out from the right that hated it, right? I think you cited, Jake Paul, slit my wrists, but also some of the other folks on the other side of the right who were like, well, John Kasich, well, actually, I thought it was a, what'd he say, home run, grand slam. It sounded like he was trying to make up a Denny's breakfast special. It was just awkward all around, and it feels like the Super Bowl's just become a gaslighting festival anymore.
Do you think
But Tony,
do you think acknowledging Latin American identity or Latin American history is inherently anti-American? Because I feel like these two things.
No,
So I don't
didn't
get
say that.
I don't get what the problem is here. He waved the American flag. He said, God bless America. I mean, Trump has been arguing for the past few months this like Don Roe doctrine that the Western Hemisphere is essentially
under the fatherhood of America's paternity.
That America is essentially the father of the Western Hemisphere.
Sure.
So for then Bad Bunny to invoke the Western Hemisphere as anti-American?
The United States has over 60 million Hispanic Americans. Spanish is the second most spoken language in the country. Florida, Texas, California, entire states have deep cultural ties to Latin America that go back generations. So when an artist references the broader Americas while waving the US flag and saying God Bless America, that's not performative rebellion. That's demographic reality. And here's the thing that often gets skipped in these debates. The Super Bowl has always been a cultural showcase, not a civics class. We've had hip-hop legends, political imagery, tributes to social movements, even overtly patriotic military displays, all on that same stage. No one says it has to fit one narrow definition of American identity. In fact, historically, the NFL itself didn't even allow players to express certain viewpoints. Remember Colin Kaepernick kneeling? That was framed as anti-American too. Years later, the league admitted it mishandled that moment. So maybe the real pattern here isn't that artists are being divisive, it's that some audiences are uncomfortable when patriotism doesn't look exactly how they expect it to. And Tony's argument about the Super Bowl not being Pan-American feels selective. The NFL actively markets games in Mexico and Brazil. They push international branding. They call their championship the World Champions every single year. So suddenly drawing a cultural connection to the Western Hemisphere is too far. That seems a little convenient. Also, criticizing ICE or government policy doesn't cancel out patriotism. The First Amendment is literally built around the idea that dissent is part of loyalty to democratic principles. The Boston Tea Party wasn't exactly a polite Yelp review of British governance. If anything, speaking out against government action while still affirming love for the country is about as textbook American as it gets.
No, I'm not saying that, but I do have a question, if I may. ¿Por qué no estamos teniendo esta conversación en español?
No, I can't
Well,
conversate.
because I only minored in Tony in Spanish, and it's been a couple years.
So,
But I would prefer not to.
Did you
the
ask if I
reason-
could conversate in Espanol, though?
The
Yeah,
reason
why
that
would
we
we-
are
why aren't
not
we having this
currently having this
conversation in
conversation in Spanish is because the audience that we will be releasing this particular panel to, the vast, vast majority of them speak English. And the same with the NFL. Again, notice that I said that this would have been perhaps more appropriate given the cultural history and participation of other countries in the World Series. But instead, it's at the NFL, which is the very Americana cultural festival point. It's a very American, United States of American sporting event. I'm not saying it's evil or un-American. I'm just saying it's out of place and performative with some clear undertones of what was trying to be accomplished. It doesn't suit the venue.
So is there
I
a problem?
disagreed.
Do you
Oh,
have sorry, Tony, do you have a problem with him singing in Spanish at the Super Bowl?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. What I'm saying is I think that the audience choice is weird. Why choose to sing in only Spanish except for the words God Bless America at the Super Bowl for the halftime show? What is
Because
the
the
point in
songs
doing
are
so?
predominantly in Spanish. And
Why do you
the
say
official-
predominantly?
The official language of Puerto Rico is both English and Spanish. Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States, so he's representing Puerto
Okay.
Rico by speaking the language that his songs are written in. He's
Okay.
a Puerto Rican artist, and I guess the idea that him speaking Spanish during this halftime show was some intentional dig or some anti-American dig, even though he very specifically said "God bless America" in English. I just don't.
And
don't
then
believe.
followed it up with a list of countries to identify what he meant by America. He
Did you
listed
take
a
that
bunch
as
of countries.
divisive or unifying? I think that was
I
more
took that
of
to mean that he
unification.
believes the word America doesn't mean the United States as it's culturally perceived here in the United States of America.
Was he holding a
That he was
football with an
making it
American
clear.
flag?
Again, I'm saying that he listed a lot of countries alongside it as a broader cultural statement. And again, as far as the Spanish, I have no issue with him speaking or singing in Spanish. As someone who is, again, fluent in Spanish and lived in and out of Hispanic households, working alongside phenomenally what I consider a lot of traditionally conservative families that have been beyond beneficial for this country in family policy and work ethic, for example, that I was able to learn in Honduran and Nicaraguan households. But specifically in this Super Bowl, I am only questioning when you do an entire Super Bowl in the language that is opposite of the core language of 99% of the viewership. Now that is,
99%.
I don't actually have the data in front of me. It says 99%,
There's like
but given
20%
the
of
audiences,
Americans are Latino, I think. I mean,
you
this
do
is a real
realize that
population.
20% doesn't all speak Spanish, right?
No, this is a real population in America. I mean,
you do
America
realize
doesn't
that
have-
20% isn't all like Spanish first
That-
language.
that's
But
not
you
what
have
I'm saying. I'm
40 to
saying
50 million people who speak Spanish in
Yeah,
America.
I'm saying representation is not some crazy dig at English. It's just representing a real portion of America.
Tony keeps framing Spanish at the Super Bowl as out of place. But let's look at the actual numbers. There are over 40-50 million Spanish speakers in the United States. That makes the US the second largest Spanish-speaking country in the world after Mexico. That's not fringe, that's not a niche. That's mainstream America in 2026. So acting like Spanish is some foreign interruption to an Americana event ignores the demographic reality of the country the NFL is broadcasting to. And here's another important point. Puerto Rico is not just culturally tied to the US, it is part of the United States. Puerto Ricans are American citizens. They serve in the US military at high rates. They pay federal taxes like Social Security and Medicare. So when a Puerto Rican artist performs in Spanish on an American stage, that's not him stepping outside of America. That's America showing up exactly as it is. What also gets lost is that the NFL itself has been aggressively expanding into Latin American markets. They host games in Mexico City. They invest heavily in Spanish language broadcasts. Telemundo and Univision regularly carry NFL programming, so the league is more than happy to cash the checks from Spanish-speaking audiences, but when a performer reflects that audience culturally, suddenly it's out of place. That feels inconsistent. And this idea that English is the core language of America is more a cultural habit than a legal fact. The United States has no official language at the federal level, never has. From its founding, this country has operated in multiple languages. German newspapers were common in early America, French was dominant in Louisiana, Spanish in the Southwest long before it was part of the US. Multilingualism isn't new here, it's foundational.
Again, if he would have sang a song or two in Spanish or had, again, I thought the wedding was beautiful and phenomenal, that kind of stuff, the imagery was wonderful. But to do the entire show in only Spanish, except for the phrase, God bless America, then followed by a bunch of countries after a Hispanic cultural celebration listing countries that, a couple of which have nothing to do with Hispanic culture or imposition at all. It came off as very strange and, again, forced. I'm not assigning cultural, moral good or evil here. I'm saying that it was clearly, there was an element of this that was very politically performative, especially
Bad
given
Bunny
the
have any
commissioner's
English
remarks.
songs?
Does he? I'm not a Bad Bunny aficionado.
Bad Bunny does not have full-length English songs. He'll occasionally use English tongue, but he mainly performs in Spanish. So it sounds like Bad Bunny gave a performance that aligns with the hundreds of other he's given as the largest, one of the largest artists in the world. He's probably one of the top few. So he's just giving a performance that not only represents a very real contingent of Americans, 40 to 50 million people that speak Spanish, he also specifically said God bless America while holding a football with an American flag. And the idea that he should have, did you want him to perform like a Kid Rock song in English? He doesn't have any songs in English. He doesn't.
Well, that's not true. Again, you just said that while he does in fact use English language in many of his songs, predominantly a lot of his songs are in Spanish.
Yeah.
I'm simply making the point that if you are going to address a large audience in a halftime show towards the United States of America, that speaking in or singing in just partly, in the language of the majority of the audience that you are addressing makes cultural sense in what is essentially a cultural celebration of these United States. That's what the Super Bowl's kind of been ever since it was the reindeer, the people dressed as reindeer dancing on the torn up field, back in the older Super Bowls. So I guess what I'm not trying to make some broad sweeping like, oh, he's deeply un-American. I'm saying he made a political point by doing this. I don't know what bragging, that and bragging about.
So
it's a political point to perform his songs as they were written. I don't understand. Like,
he does choose the songs that he performs, right?
And he chose his 3 or 4 most popular songs across the entire globe. I don't agree with this idea that because he spoke in a way that is not, because he spoke in Spanish and that is not the predominant language of America, that somehow has friction with the culture. How many Super Bowl halftime shows have we had? Like dozens and dozens of dozens where people give a diverse amount of performances. We've had everyone from Kendrick Lamar to Michael Jackson, who stood there for multiple minutes on stage, Frozen, remember? So, I mean, the idea that because we have one Super Bowl halftime show that represents, a different portion of the country and still represents our country too, like, I'm not even going to concede that he was excluding people who speak English from this. He waved the American flag. He said, God bless America. We had American traditions being shown, Western traditions like marriage being shown here. It was a pretty overall unifying show.
Bad Bunny performing primarily in Spanish isn't some strategic halftime plot twist. That's literally how he built his career. He's one of the most streamed artists on the planet, and the vast majority of his catalog is in Spanish. Telling him to partially switch to English for the Super Bowl would be like telling Adele to throw in a reggaeton verse just to balance things out. Artists perform the music that made them who they are. That's not a manifesto. That's consistency. And the idea that the Super Bowl is this sacred, linguistically uniform American ritual just doesn't hold up historically. We've had halftime shows that leaned heavily into hip-hop culture, which critics once called too political. We've had overt military tributes. We've had performances loaded with social symbolism. In 2020, Colin Kaepernick was still a lightning rod over kneeling during the anthem, something that again was framed as anti-American at the time. Years later, public opinion shifted dramatically, and even the NFL acknowledged it could have handled that moment differently. The pattern here is familiar. Cultural expression that challenges comfort zones gets labeled divisive before it gets normalized. There's also this assumption baked into Tony's argument that English is the default cultural access point for patriotism. But the US has no federally designated official language. It never has. Spanish has been spoken in what is now the United States longer than English in states like California, Texas, and Florida. So when a Puerto Rican artist performs in Spanish at an Asian American event, that's not cultural friction. That's historical continuity.